Hey, Patrick, how you doing, bud?
Not too bad at all, buddy. So, what have we today?
We have John Pupola on Dad Saves America talking about the issues in Cuba and how that is affecting things.
Cuba has really kind of gone off the news headlines as late because of conflicts in Iran and so on.
Right, but they've been out of power for a few days now, and things are getting real hot over there.
Right.
So
yeah, I know the blockade is really hurting them at the moment.
Big time. So we'll let him cook a little bit, and he's got a pretty good run in. We'll work with that and then see what's going on. So here we go.
Okay.
President Díaz-Canel from Cuba announcing working relationships now, talking relationships with the U.S. government.
As soon as the capture of Nicolas Maduro, January 3rd, they were cut off essentially their 60% of oil imports that they would receive from the Venezuelan government.
Cuba right now is in very bad shape. They're talking to Marco, and we'll be doing something with Cuba very soon.
That revolution, it's not even a revolution, that thing they have has survived on subsidies from the Soviet Union and now from Venezuela. They don't get subsidies anymore, so they're...
Right, so the Russians were buying sugar at a massive up cost and funneling resources and all kinds of things in. And then when Russia was unable as a state to help them, they were getting most of their oil from Venezuela with a pretty good chunk from Mexico. Right. And when Venezuela was chopped down, the 14 or 15% that Mexico was providing was then chopped off very shortly from Washington, D.C. So they're at no fuel. So no tourism, no nothing. Yeah, it's like the worst as it could possibly for their economy. And he's right. They've been propped up by subsidies from other countries since their inception. Right.
And what's the U.S.'s long-term plan with the humanitarian crisis that will eventually happen to Cuba? Have they any plan to help Cuba out with that?
I'm pretty sure they are. I mean, it's 90 miles off the coast of Florida. They're going to have to do something. They're the ones that caused it, so they should probably make it right. But I think they're looking for a more democratic type society. It's considered the least free country in the Western Hemisphere and one of the least free countries in the world, on par with North Korea. So that's a reign of terror for almost 50 years.
And what do you think the U.S.'s long-term plan there is?
To turn it into a giant luxury casino, I suppose, like he suggested for Gaza. But the Gazans weren't having it.
Or is like most things with the United States, they have a very short-term plan, but nothing long-term?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what their plan is. I'm not in the State Department. I can't call Marco Rubio there and say, hey, buddy, what's your plan? He wouldn't tell me anyway. So it's interacting with a foreign power.
It seems like they're kind of stumbling into kind of, they don't know how to deal with the aftermaths of most of these decisions at the moment.
100% blockade on fuel. So
that's it. But what's the answer afterwards? I think that's what most people want to know.
Economic growth and helping them get their feet back on the ground and getting a terrorist regime out of power, I think, is the long-term goal. I don't know what the Doctors Without Borders or what other plans they have to help the people, right? Because if the oil flows back, then they'll turn the lights back on. I don't know at what point it becomes irreparable, or will they have to do a complete restructuring of their infrastructure, because it's all 50s and 60s technology. It's not great, you know?
Yes, that's decades of rebuilding. Do you think the U.S. would be committed to doing decades of nation building?
I'm pretty sure they would. Especially since the Secretary of State's parents are Cuban immigrants. He might have a vested interest, and I think that's steering Donald Trump's decision making on this one as well. So, but let's see how he's going to play this.
We're in a lot of trouble.
Latin America has had swings and instability for a very long time, for decades and decades. I have mixed feelings about this because I don't, in general, particularly like U.S. foreign interventionism, but I love taking down commies.
So that's a pretty interesting point. So he doesn't really appreciate America's nation building, and there's a lot of places where we have gotten that wrong and done poorly on the world stage. but this government might be a government that really just has to go based on how communist function works. Right, the people are downtrodden. It is again one of the least free places on the planet.
But there's dozens of non-free countries in, say, the likes of the African continent and so on. But you don't see, the US trying to fly the flag over there for any particular reason.
Well, I think this is a Monroe Doctrine thing where the United States is like the Western Hemisphere is ours, stay away, and we're going to fix all these things. But
I've heard that from the State Department of the United States in the last couple of months, where they're on about the Monroe Doctrine and so on. But then they send a carrier task force all the way over to Iran. So I'm just saying that the Monroe Doctrine kind of falls apart. Argument falls apart pretty quickly when you see them flying the flags and other parts.
Well, we were looking at the justification for that, and there was nowhere in it. The Iran conflict issue has apparently nothing to do with Monroe Doctrine, but from their perspective, Cuba does. And that is a horrific regime. It's not good at all. People get on boats and rafts and try and get those 90 miles north.
As I said, there's dozens of countries around the world, but not such good regimes.
Right.
You can list out dozens of countries like that, but
this is the problem is in my backyard. This is in my backyard problem. It's like right there. It's a big thorn in our ass.
And I think it's an old conflict that America wants to settle. It's a score they want to settle for a long time.
They want to get this thing handled.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if the people of Cuba are treated with much more respect as people, and there isn't a secret police apparatus and all the other things that force equity in situations where there is no equity, then maybe there's a good thing can come from this. I'm hoping for positive outcomes, right? So,
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Let's see what old John has to say.
Every time socialism and the seizing of private property by the government has been instituted on every country, in every creed, it has resulted in terror.
And that's a fact. Forcing equity and then stealing people's labor and then stealing their things is definitely horrible, and it never turns out right. We've talked about communist regimes and socialism, and
we've all seen the history books. Actually, I've always said to young people, just read the history books.
But they don't, and they don't.
Of the world.
But they don't get taught these things in school these days. It seems like higher education is all about.
Yeah, but there's plenty of YouTube videos out there. There's plenty of resources in their local library, online, everywhere to learn history outside of school.
But that's not exciting. That's not exciting at all.
Yeah. I think that's the problem. I think, especially, say, a young country like the United States, where they don't seem to understand or want to understand the lessons of history. Like, nation building sounds great on a news headline, but that takes 10, 15, 20, 30 years to rebuild a nation.
Oh, right. That's long-range thinking for sure. It is. And you have to have a good plan in place, right?
Yes, and unfortunately, as you said earlier, the United States doesn't have a great track record when it comes to that.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Well, I would like them to be better. I would certainly like them to be better.
Yeah, they want them to be better. I think they want them to be more like the United States, which is a lofty goal and so on. But
that goal is way too idealized. Like, other people do not have the same cultural background that we do. They're not going to be like us,
Yes, so. I think they learned that lessons when they in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on.
Oh yeah.
Every country is different. It's democracy works if the culture is there for it. It took Europe hundreds of years to get to where we are right now. It took you 200 plus years to get to where we are right now with democracy.
All right. Well, and when we started, we weren't the economic powerhouse that we are now, right? We weren't that. We were some colonies, and then we developed, and
and so on. It takes time, nation building, as they would say.
Yes.
I think Cuba, as you were saying, the fact that it's off their coast, they probably will have a more of a vested interest, as you would say,
for sure,
to build that nation up.
I am concerned about the populace of Cuba. I'm worried about the people. And when you have a repressive regime and the people don't have a voice, then things don't happen and they continue to be taken advantage of. And that's not great from any perspective, right? So.
Yeah, but you can't rescue every nation in the world either.
Nope, you can't. Sometimes people have to fail, and they have to fail as a group. So here we go.
Yeah.
In poverty and terror, That is the facts. The fact that we have to have this conversation in 2026 is fundamentally a complete failure of our education system. Because a real education system would teach all of us real history. And real history has a very different spin on colonialism and which colonial force was the worst, the most repressive, the most far-reaching, the most dominant.
Colonialism, I don't know, is necessarily a bad thing, but our kids are being taught that bringing our culture to other places is a bad thing. And there isn't any serious delve into why certain kinds of political systems.
History.
Right.
History has proven that it doesn't work.
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit.
You cannot oppress another country with your culture.
Right. Well, and it always ends in.
Has not worked for thousands and thousands of years.
But socialism always ends up.
I think the US hasn't learned that lesson yet.
Right, but socialism always ends up in tragedy and misery. It always ends up in tragedy.
Yes,
every time.
But so does democracy if it's not managed right either. You can't suddenly stick your flag in a country and say you're democratic now. That's it.
Right.
Without understanding the culture behind that.
Right.
Like, especially when we think of the likes of Iraq when they went in with their tribal system and so on. They had their own form before Saddam Hussein, their own form of democratic government.
Right.
With tribes and so on. But then Saddam Hussein came in, he rose to power, and the United States then came in to try to nation build and tried to bring in their own form of democracy, which completely formed to their form of democracy. And as I say, if you go around the world with a colonial ideal, it'll always end badly for that country that's trying to do
and
it.
Part of the issue with Iraq was that it was a minority leadership bloc, and the people didn't feel like they were represented. Right. So that's a problem too.
Yeah, exactly. But as I'm saying, Saddam Hussein came in and promised the sun, moon, and stars, and the usual big talk as most of these coward little men have. And as I said, communism, yes, is bad. But I think any form of oppressive government is bad.
Right.
No matter what kind of flag it flies.
If the people don't feel represented, then there's a problem. Socialism doesn't represent them at all. It only ends up representing the top few percent of people.
Yeah, the sad thing, all through history, when you see socialism rise, it's usually down to people being defranchised in some shape or form, especially the working class.
Right, and then they want to create a utopia that isn't a utopia.
Yeah,
because it doesn't work like that.
Because of human nature in general.
Right,
we can be pretty selfish creatures when we choose to be.
Just a little bit.
When it comes to resources.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I want your things, and I'm going to take them from you.
Yeah.
And that is the European colonial power known as Marxism, cooked up in French salons by people living off their buddies like Karl Marx, and then propagated by the Soviet Union in the aftermath of the Bolshevik Revolution. What most people don't understand, and what a friend of mine, an economist, Phil Magnus, pointed out, is that Karl Marx himself was basically sort of one of many like kooky utopian left-wing progressive scribblers right up until 1917.
Right. He was just a grifter, Him and Engels were making all kind of noise about how this is the best, and it's not.
I think we have all come across them in every college campus. The guys who sit inside in the coffee shops all day talking about revolution. We all come across them, no matter what college you go to in the world. And he's pretty much one of those little guys sitting in a coffee shops, as he was pointed out rightly. So basically a guy living off his buddies.
Pretty much. Couch surfing. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Avoiding showers, that guy. Come on, really?
Yeah, as I say, even in this modern time, you can go to any college all around the world and you'll have those guys. If you know what I mean. You'll all have them.
These guys. All right, here we go.
He was indistinguishable from a kind of mass of utopian writers. But with the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviet Union proceeded to promote him and turn him in their quest for total global domination, also known as colonialism, into their project. They created institutes to push Marx and Marxism-Leninism around the world. They funded places like Cuba, which exported this foreign idea to have ownership and to trade with each other, is human. It is natural. Communism is unnatural. It is a colonial force. It has been imposed on the world by the Soviet Union.
Right. So it's a form of colonialism that doesn't attempt to help the populace where it lands. Right. It is intended to give a small group of people power so they can rip all the resources out and live like kings, queens, and emperors, and then leave the little people with nothing. You end up with wild things like Lysenkoism and all kinds of other strange things. When I tell you a thing is true, and you're like, that's obviously not true. And they say, well, you have to believe the thing we're telling you. And that paradigm is non-functional. It's just, it doesn't work, right?
No. And unfortunately, you'll see that with a lot of colonial ideals, no matter what flag they're flying, as I would say, especially communism. It's a very, at its core, is a very bad system. It'll work on paper, but it never has worked in reality because of human nature.
I don't even think it works on paper.
Yeah, even when you see, as you were saying, even when you see the little people at the bottom, the big people on top, that's always going to happen. All true, no matter what form of government you have. But communism is definitely one of the worst forms out there.
Definitely non-functional. All right.
By force, by gulags and walls and men with guns. And yes, the US has been an imperial power too, but ours is of a different sort. What President Trump...
So if you look up Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago, if you want to read it's amazing. It's a series of books, but the first one is amazing. It will give you a bird's eye view of the horrific nature of that government. If you think, you know what, we should try this utopian abundance thing. It's not utopian, and it is absolutely not abundant. And you can see tragedy, misery, pain, and suffering that system bestows upon the people.
Oh yeah, but any extreme form of government, either from communism to extreme national socialism, any extremes on that curve always ends with guys with guns and cages.
Right. Well, they remove your ability to speak against the government, and then they kill you. It's a pretty much 1-2 dead kind of thing. So,
and it's very important for people, especially living in a democracy, to guard against that happening in their own countries.
Right. Right. For sure.
Especially when you see the likes of free speech being clamped down across the world.
And gun confiscation. When you have those two things, you can't fight against the government because then they will have the guns. And as my friend Patrick says, here come the conversation soldiers. They're going to tell you.
Yeah, the sad thing is when you see it across, say over in your own country, when they start cracking down on free speech in they're not even pretending to call it the name of freedom. It's up to democracies to guard against any form of crackdowns, no matter what flag they're flying.
100%. All right, here we go.
Trump did with Mr. Maduro is of a different kind than a lot of the typical U.S. intervention. I personally, just my own opinion is, I'm glad he did it. Take them all out. Take all the communists out. That's my position, with the caveat that these things usually don't go great anyway. The reason why communism and socialism fail is because no central planner has the knowledge to manage a complex society. That's why we need individual freedom. And that applies equally to foreign interventions and nation building abroad.
Right. So when you have a democratic form of government, what you will generally end up with is the market dictating, because the market will drive incentive. And when the market drives incentive, then people will attempt to do the best they can to gain self-interest wise as much resources for themselves as they can. And in a fair system, or as fair a system as you can get, the more contracts you can enter into with other people, the better things are going to be. The money will accelerate through the system, and everybody gets a chance to get a piece of the action. That's
the fundamental nature of the modern world. Is every business, country, all has to interact with each other on an equal footing when it comes, as you were saying, comes to trade and money and so on.
Right. The ability to enter into contracts is the thing that makes that work. Because like you said, there isn't a single planner that's going to know how many tomatoes I want in my house or how much my
Exactly.
buddy's going to want steaks and chickens, right? He's not going to know,
Yeah.
right?
And
But
that's very important. That's where communism falls down. Is you have a communist country trying to do everything itself, which in the modern world you cannot do. No matter how communist your country is, you still have to trade with the outside world.
Yep.
You still have to interact with the outside world, and
Right.
doing that is also a threat to your own communist system, because people suddenly say, "Wait a minute, those guys have a better life than we do."
Right. They get all the tomatoes and chickens and steaks they want, and I have to eat this gruel. I don't want this.
Yes.
This is bad.
Yes.
I'm not a fan.
So that's why I think one of the contributing factors of the fall of the Soviet Union was, one, they couldn't manufacture everything themselves, no matter how much they tried. They got pretty, say, good 95% there, but they still had to do a certain amount of trading, either with China or other countries outside of them. But also, when that trade started happening, other ideals started seeping into the system.
Yep.
There are people who are suddenly picking up Western television programs showing this a completely, colorful life of driving around when you wanted to, having big dinners, or going on holidays to sunny places. And as you said, they're sitting there with their whatever they were getting.
Or having two potatoes instead of one.
Yes.
Right? A second potato is kind of a win.
Yeah. And you have to remember, that's a double-edged sword as well with any form of extreme governments in this modern world, is people do have access now to the internet.
The information age, for sure,
yeah. So it's very hard for any strong man to hold on to power.
Right, because you can see what your neighbor countries are doing. And if they're having a good time, you're like, I want to have a good time too.
Yeah, I want to have a better life for my family. I want to go on holidays. I want to go somewhere.
I want to take the convertible to the drive-in movie theater and eat popcorn.
I want the Western life, where I can sit down, have my house, and I don't have to worry about guys kicking in my door.
Right.
Right. So even in this modern age, that's all these systems usually collapse in their own weight anyway.
Facts. All right, here we go.
We can't run communism even at the level of a city. Trying to run other countries isn't up for grabs. And actually, for what it's worth, President Trump has basically said, nah, we're going to protect the oil. We're going to make sure there's no more thugs. And then we're going to mostly protect the oil. You know what has turned out to be the thing that the Soviets understood, the thing that actually all of the red wave on this planet has ultimately been powered by? Crude oil.
That's a fact. That resource specifically allowed you to make all kinds of wild decisions, because you can enter into those trade deals with your natural gas or your crude oil, and you will get propped up for a very long time. That's why a lot of the terrorist regimes who have, say, cobalt or crude oil or natural gas, when they have access to these things,
rare earth materials or so on, not just oil, but
right.
That's how come a lot of these dictators all across Central Africa can still be in power, because they trade all these rare resources.
Right. If you guys want to look up a book called Red Cobalt, absolutely amazing. It will tell you a lot of things about how African countries who have power are staying in power. Same kind of thing with the Middle East. They have all the access to all the resources that makes the world go vroom. So we want it.
Yeah.
We run on petroleum. Right.
Yeah. And at the moment, Trump, as part of his national security policy, wants to kind of make sure that the US controls quite a lot of the dinosaur juice at the moment.
The dinosaur juice.
Hell yeah. So that's going to work. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But hopefully
it goes well. Hopefully it goes well. We're having a bit of a conflict right now about over some resources. So we'll see how that turns out. Our next episode is going to be on that. We're letting that thing cook for a little bit, because there's a lot going on. And we need to get to that. But this is important as a lead into that, to understand resources, socialism, and terror type governments, and why it is we might be there beyond just the dinosaur juice. So, all right, here we go.
It's the greatest irony of our times. The Soviet Union was centered in Russia. Russia has always basically been a petrol state. At one point, at its height, the Soviet Union was funding something like 20% of Cuba's entire GDP.
From Russian ports for a long time.
Right, and a lot of that had to do with they were buying sugar at 4 times the cost on market, and they were also sending them crude oil, right?
Yeah, and they're also sending other resources there as well to kind of
Right.
prop this government up.
Right. And then what Cuba was sending out to the world was doctors. Right. Yeah, that was their resource, was doctors and medical professionals. So they trained a bunch of doctors and would ship them all over the world to these countries. So, all right, here we go.
Now, military supplies have been sent to Cuba. Not only rockets, but bomb-carrying planes. And so close is Cuba to the States that the warning system would be useless.
Old school
American
Navy
men of
stuff.
war rapidly deployed, and to the red ships bound for Cuba went orders to change course. In Cuba, President Castro long ago chose to ally his government with Russia, a course he may regret. He made his allegiance clear at the United Nations 2 years ago. The Russian leader played up as only he can. But as we go to press, it is announced that he will suspend shipments of arms to Cuba. Kennedy has spoken and acted in the way the Soviet understands.
Despite having wealth come out of the ground, they collapsed. When they collapsed, they stopped funding Cuba. And so Cuba needed a different petrol state to fund its communism.
Venezuela.
And they turned to Venezuela. Hugo Chavez, he was only there because he had a buddy.
Hugo Chavez.
That's it.
Del
That's
Castro.
why he was there. And why did that buddy hold on to power despite being opposed by the United States just a couple miles to the north? They backed Mr. Chavez, and then Mr. Chavez returned in kind, sending whole tankers full of oil to Cuba for free. Mr. Chavez, Mr. Hugo Chavez, he was beloved by Hollywood. He was beloved by all of these people. He still is. He is lionized. He did exactly what they want to do. He did all of it. He built an entire policy regime that looks an awful lot like Mr. Mamdani. Most of Mr. Mamdani's entire set of South American inspired, let's say, proposals are flat out theft of the public.
Right. So along with that, he hired a lady, what's her name? Sia, who is telling people that property ownership is white supremacy, and that people are just going to have a different relationship with property, which doesn't meet the American ideal. So let's see what.
No, I think I remember watching that video, and the sad thing is, what she was trying to describe is what we have, say, in Ireland. You know, the social housing programs and so on, which is completely foreign, as you would say, to the likes of, say, the American ideal, where you own your own property.
Yeah, get you a house. Right. That's the big dream. Big house.
Remember, that's unique
fence.
to
Cars.
It works. Yeah, but socialist type systems like that work, say, in the likes of Ireland and other European countries, but they will never, as I would say, work in the likes of the United States. Completely different mindset.
Right, but that's social assistance. That's not socialism, right?
Yeah,
that is social welfare programs to assist your populace. It isn't. We're taking your guns and your ability to say things.
But the funny thing is, one of your politicians, I can't think of his name, when he was asked about, you know, the social housing programs that we're all quite used to, say, in Europe and so on, he was saying that's the form of socialism. We would never have that in the United States and so on.
The form of social welfare, not necessarily socialism, but yeah.
Yes, but you know, it's so foreign, it would never work in, say, in the United States.
Right, we were talking about it before. Culturally, it doesn't work. Right. So let's see what young Madami has to say.
Platform is that every single person should have housing, whether you call it the abolition of private property or you call it, you know, just a statewide housing guarantee.
The statewide housing guarantee functionally forces like theft, because I'm going to steal your labor to enforce a housing situation. Right? That it misses a lot.
It is preferable to what is going on right now.
This is someone that wants to steal 8 million people's property and put it in the hands of the state. Again, as part of his effort to make everything free and to make housing a human right, which of course means it's a right to other people's property and labor, which last time I checked sounds a little more like slavery.
I was elected as a Democratic Socialist, and I will govern as a Democratic Socialist. I will not abandon my principles for fear of being deemed radical.
He clearly will not. I will give it to him on that. Here is all of their favorite charismatic leader going around doing what they intend to do in his country while it still had some wealth to steal.
Chávez ordenó la expropiación de otras 3 edificaciones en los alrededores de
Oh, this is where he was pointing at buildings and saying, that's my building now, like just flat out.
la Plaza Bolívar.
En aquella casita que está allá vivió Bolívar recién casado. Esa casita que se ve ahí con 2 balcones. Y ahí lo que están unos negocios. Exprópiese.
Expropriase. He is in the square, I believe that's Bolivar Square,
Yep.
just pointing at buildings to take. Take that one. Take that one. He would walk into people's businesses and say, this is now the people's business, which is to say his business. And what were the results? What happened? One of Mr. Chavez's programs was called the Great Mission Housing Venezuela, GMVV. And the state seized unused land and property to build, at least they were building something, I guess, but build 4.6 million homes. But the residents in them didn't really get to keep the keys and were muscled to vote for him in order to keep the keys to these homes that they didn't really own. It was all a patronage scam to keep him in power. Of course, Mr. Chavez had the benefit of running a petrol state, a state powered by oil, where
It certainly helps to have all the resources like that you can trade on the market, because then all the money comes in. People are going to want your fuel either way, right?
Yeah, as I said, a lot of these countries trot along, trading on oil and whatever rare resources they have. And as you say, it keeps them going for a long time until the people just will get sick of it.
Well, because none of that wealth is filtered down. None of the wealth is filtered down, right? They can't go into contracts, so they can't move the money.
No, and people get fed up with it, and then there's normal, as we've seen all the way through history, people will eventually rise up and overthrow their governments. It does eventually happen to every strongman dictator out there. Eventually, they do lose the reins of power. Now, while they have the reins of power, untold damage is always done to the population. But eventually, people do rise up naturally as well.
Right. All right, here we go.
money actually grows out of the ground. But that didn't stop him from sending Venezuela down a dark path because of socialism. And after his death, his successor, Mr. Maduro, well, kept the train running.
So Venezuela, at its height before Hugo Chavez came in, was one of the richest countries, GDP per person, in the world. On the world stage, it was a very, very successful country. Amazing, beautiful, great resources, great assets, great everything.
But Venezuela today, as we speak, still has the same government still there.
Right. Machado, who won the election, should have gotten it over the vice president if things were going to be, in quotes, made right. But I think their next election should be actually monitored, and whoever wins should be the one that wins. I'm hoping that happens. I'm hoping we don't strongman the strongman there.
Yeah, well, the last election was monitored too, and she clearly won it. But
right, but then Maduro said, "Nah, you didn't win. It's me. I'm still the boss." I'm like, what the hell?
When the US took out Maduro and brought him to New York for trial and so on, the United States put his vice president in charge, not the democratically elected leader, but the vice president that was former head of the secret police over there.
Right.
So it
not a good look.
It seems like the United States kind of will make deals with whoever controls the keys of the kingdom in a lot of ways.
Right. That's just on its face. That's what's going on there. So, all right.
Yeah.
Cool.
A former bus driver and trade unionist, Nicolas Maduro became the protege of revolutionary Hugo Chavez and was catapulted to the presidency when Chavez died in 2013. He was not long in office before protests erupted over runaway inflation and critical shortages of basic goods. Protests in which his government quickly gained a reputation as repressive. Indeed, the International Criminal Court opened an investigation into the regime in 2021 for alleged crimes against humanity, including torture and sexual
Oh, there she is. Right there. That's the new boss right there with the red jacket.
violence.
By and large, these international law enterprises are pretty suspect. They are often dominated by the leaders of dictatorial regimes.
Right, and even those guys are saying that dude's bad. That dude's real bad. Like, he's giving us a real bad look here.
The International Criminal Court is usually headed up by Swiss judges and so on. You know, completely independent judges.
Right.
So I think that's a kind of a bit of a miss kind of
characterization
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I understand his sentiment behind it.
Well, like the Security Council and stuff like that has some very strange picks on there. I'm like, I don't understand why that country's there. They're not good. They're not good at all. They represent power with natural resources.
When you look at an older institution like the United Nations, when that was set up, the world was a different place back then.
Very different for sure, right?
The reason why the Security Council was set up, it was to make sure that we don't all suddenly take out the big nukes and start nuking each other as well.
Right, throwing the bombs. Right.
Yeah. So in order to get onto the Security Council, you have to be a nuclear power in a lot of ways. And rightly or wrongly, it was a good idea at the time to make sure we didn't nuke ourselves.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't do that.
Now, when you're seeing other nuclear powers coming onto the table, it's going to be a very different Security Council in a couple of years' time, I would say.
Yeah, very different world. All right, here we go.
I believe Iran has played a role in the UN Human Rights Committee, Council, whatever. So it's fair to be skeptical of a lot of these things. Even so, even the international sort of like left of center progressive technocrats don't think and haven't thought for a long time that Nicolas Maduro was legitimate. He was just a thug.
Millions of Venezuelans have left the country under his rule due to political and economic troubles.
I also happen to have spent, my entire June in neighboring Colombia, in Bogota. So I got a taste firsthand of some of the instability in our neighbors to the south. I saw on the streets of Bogota that the people begging were there from Venezuela. I saw families begging on the streets in Bogota and around Colombia, all from Venezuela, or claiming to be from Venezuela, because it was understood that basically there was what has turned out to be one of the worst refugee crises on planet Earth, out of this country that has the largest oil reserves on the planet. Only socialism can make that kind of thing fail.
As, despite sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, the country's economic hardships continued and only worsened as international sanctions ramped up against his regime, deemed undemocratic by the US, Europe, and much of Latin America, who declined to recognize both his 2018 and 2024 re-elections.
These are beautiful countries with beautiful people, and they are being oppressed. Oppressed by people that, frankly, have far too many friends north of the border.
It's not about democracy. It's not about the last election. It's because the Venezuelan Bolivarian Socialist Project did indeed challenge U.S. domination.
Venezuela challenged U.S. domination by driving its population into desperate, grinding poverty.
I think we're going to shut on that one. So, as you can see, that socialist regime was horrific. And that is where Cuba was getting the lion's share of all of their things to continue their reign of terror in their country. Again, those two places were considered some of the least free places in the world. And right now they still are. Right?
They still are. There's no other way of addressing that one. Even the US taking out the Venezuela's leader and putting in the vice president still has not improved that country. Now, as you say, will they stand over the next election? That'll be an interesting one.
Really hope they do. Really hope that is made right. That would be the best in my eyes.
I think eventually the people of Venezuela will have their own future. It'll take a while. There will be a popular uprising there. Like it's already happening in Cuba at the moment. You can see it a mile away. No matter how they try to put a cap on it, people only tolerate so much.
Right, for sure.
And it'll be interesting to see the US's reaction to all this.
Well, I hope we go in there.
It would be interesting to see if that will happen. Will they go in and develop them?
I really hope they do. I hope they fix the infrastructure. I hope they make it the beautiful place that it has the potential to be. It is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And I think they deserve, the people deserve better than what they're getting, right?
But are the US people prepared to pump billions into it?
Well, if we can rein in some of our fraud issues, we might be able to free up a couple bucks, I think. So,
Or will it just be lost in the ether of another conflict?
I really hope it doesn't.
Yeah.
But
I hope so as well for
high
these
hopes.
people.
High hopes. So, all right, for Patrick McCallum, I'm Alex Johansson. We are the A&P Gents. Like, subscribe, and help us beat the algorithm. We are out.